When I lived down in Houston, Texas, I had the incredible opportunity to take students on a 5-day backpacking trip through the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. We would load into a van and we would drive all the way from Houston to Pagosa Springs, Colorado in 2 days. On the first day, we would get to know each other more because there's not much else to do on a 15-hour car ride. We would get to know the things that we liked about each other and also the things that could tend to get under our skin. The second day, we would start our in-depth spiritual part of the trip, and we always launched it at the exact same place. About an hour north of Santa Fe, New Mexico, there was a little nature preserve, and at this point, there is just dirt everywhere. It is a rural desert, and there's a couple of pavilions off on the left side of the road that has a picnic table underneath it. And if you were to go there right now, you would see in that same area a barbed wire fence that lines the property. And behind that barbed wire fence are multiple piles of rocks. And you might look at that and wonder, what are those there for? Do you remember the story of God freeing the Israelites from captivity under the Egyptians? You know, the 10 plagues and let my people go, all of that kind of stuff. Do you remember the parting of the Red Sea? How the water was split and Israel crossed on dry land? About how the Egyptians came in pursuit and the water came crashing down onto them. Now Israel was split into 12 tribes that were all descendants from Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. And it was his kids and their descendants. Have you ever been on a road trip with your family? You know, they can be really fun, but they can also be really stressful. Imagine having a huge family, except your road trip isn't just 1 day or 2 days, it's 40 years long. As you can imagine, there was lots of grumbling and complaining and conflict that happened along the way. But as we pick up this story in Joshua 3 and 4, that road trip is coming to an end. And you get this incredible story of Joshua taking charge over the people of Israel from Moses. And it's a pretty big moment and it's pretty big shoes to fill. But Joshua is ready for the challenge that God is about to give him. God is asking him to lead the 12 tribes of Israel through the Jordan River. God knew that they had been through some stuff on this road trip, but he also knew that he needed to remind them of the Israelites' past, what he has brought them through, and that he was still with them. So God commanded Joshua to have the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant to step into the water, and all of those 12 tribes, all of the people that were represented, to follow the priests into the water. And as the priest's feet touched the water began to recede upstream. It created this giant dry bed for the Israelites to pass through. The water at this point should have been really heavy. In fact, up until it receded, it was the middle of harvest season and the water was overflowing the banks. But it was so dry that the entire nation of Israel, all 12 tribes, all of those families, crossed the Jordan on dry ground. I can only imagine being the kids that had been born during this time. They're on this 40-year journey and their parents are telling them stories of God parting the Red Sea for them. And there he was doing it again on the Jordan River. God was still faithful. And then God had Joshua do something really interesting. He had him get one representative from each of those tribes and have them pick up a large rock. Now, this isn't a large rock, it's a small rock, but it's good for this illustration. But he had them pick up a large rock and had them pile them up there so that future generations would look at that pile of rocks and say, what is this here for? And then they could tell them what God had done in that place, that God had done something miraculous. Each year, I would take a different group of students to that exact same spot outside of Santa Fe, New Mexico, and then through the same trails at Colorado. And starting at that spot in Santa Fe, all the way through the end of the trip, we would find piles and piles of rocks all throughout the trip. There was a growing awareness that the God who had been faithful to students in the past would meet with them again there as well. I read a definition recently of peace that I absolutely love. It said that peace was a condition of freedom from disturbance, outwardly or inwardly. This last year, 2020, has been chaotic. And maybe you felt like you have been on a 20-year road trip through the desert with your family. It's been filled with twists and turns, and it's kind of like we've been going through the same motions over and over again. I would definitely define that as a disturbance both outwardly and inwardly. Pastor Arlie just had an incredible message on peace, about how we can make peace, how we can keep peace, how we can show peace, and how we can know peace. Maybe God has done a work in your life in the past, and you need to be reminded that He is faithful. Ask for peace in the midst of that situation. Maybe God has given you peace, like the Israelites on the other side of the Jordan, and you can display your peace in a way that people look at you and go, "How did you get that?" And you can tell them about the miracle that God has done in you. In any case, we all have something that the world desperately needs. Experience the freedom that Jesus brings. Experience the peace that God has given you, and make a pile of rocks in your life today.